Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm Rebecca Green. I'm the founder of Dear Producer. I'm excited to have you guys all here today for this webinar, What I Wish I Would Have Learned in Film School. The topic is, pretty self-explanatory from the title of what we're going to be talking about. But the goal here, isn't just to point out what we didn't learn, but to really dig in and leave you all with information and tools to help you along your way, whether you're in school now or never went to film school or well into your career. We're going to cover a wide variety of topics today. For those of you who are new to Dear Producer, I launched the site in 2018 with the goal to help bring the producing community together and educate filmmakers on the state of the business, particularly as it relates to independent film. I do interviews with producers, and I've also created a handful of resources, such as the Producer Sustainability Report, Distributor's Fact Sheet, and most recently put out the Producer's Rate Sheet. Dear Producer continues to morph itself based on what I feel is needed at any given time, but the goal is to create tools for producers who are striving to build a sustainable career. I'm happy to be co-hosting this webinar with the Documentary Producers Alliance, who is also fighting the good fight for producers, and want to introduce Beth Levinson to you to say a little bit about the DPA.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rebecca. You're doing the most amazing job. And I reviewed the producer rate sheet today again, and it's just fantastic. And yeah, for those of you who aren't familiar with the DPA, we established ourselves in 2016, and we are a diverse coalition of more than 400 members, setting standards for inclusive, sustainable, and equitable documentary practices. We work to amplify the voices of producers worldwide and really to educate the field and industry about our role, which is just so often misunderstood. Again, we're really happy to be here, and we also want to acknowledge our founding supporter, Genuine Article Pictures, and we also want to acknowledge the support of the Sundance Institute and our fiscal sponsor, the Film Collaborative. Really happy to be here, and I'm going to kick it back to you, Rebecca, and the panelists.
Thank you. I also have sponsors to thank, including Genuine Article Pictures. One of the things for Dear Producer, it's really important to me that I keep all of the content free, which is kind of part of today's conversation about film school. And my sponsors have allowed me to do that. Cinereach in particular has sponsored these webinars this year and last year. The rate sheet that Beth is talking about, I just put in the chat for everybody. It was created to acknowledge the work that producers put into participating in events like this, which often go uncompensated, both for webinars, panels, listening sessions, giving advice to filmmakers, reading scripts. Producers put in a lot of free labor. And so I created this rate sheet as a way to help producers, have another tool to help reach sustainability. And so give it a look in the chat, and, due to my sponsors, I am able to, offer each panelist a stipend here today, which is also important to me. So thank you to Cinereach for that. I have a lot of questions prepped, but please feel free to add anything into the Q&A, and I encourage you guys to chat with each other in the chat box. And if you're not subscribed to Dear Producer, that's the last thing. Just go to the site and sign up for our newsletter. It is a low volume, high quality, I like to think, newsletter for you guys. So we are now going to dive in after that intro. I would love if each of you could just introduce yourself and tell us where you went to film school. And I would love to hear why you chose to go to film school. And I would love to start with Natalie.
Thanks, Rebecca. Thank you for having me. This is awesome. I wish this existed when I was contemplating film school. I went to USC for film school, and the reason I chose to go ultimately was because I just had zero, not even connections. I didn't know anyone in the industry. I'm Armenian American. My parents, one's a doctor, one's a therapist. I grew up in the Valley, but Hollywood felt very far away. So for me, it was really like, how do I even break in if I can't even like visualize it? So that was the main reason for me.
Tori?
I went to University of Nebraska at Lincoln. I'm from Nebraska originally, and similarly, I felt like I knew I was interested in filmmaking, but it was so far from me, being from Nebraska. And I didn't even know you could study film until I started looking at universities. I was looking in particular for photography, and then I learned you could study film, and just felt like the right move for me because I knew I wanted to work in the industry and I had no direct connections in.
Kimberly?
Hi, I'm Kim. I went to Johns Hopkins for undergrad and then NYU for the film MFA. I applied to NYU out of fear. I came from like a super blue collar background. Like my dad is a high school graduate. My mom is not a high school graduate. I'm adopted. I like totally blue collar family. Like my dad literally drove a forklift like in a Coke factory, like Coca-Cola. And so when I was always instructed like, go to a good school. That's like the path to life. And then you get into a good school and you're like, okay, and then like what? And I got totally seduced by fiction writing. And that was my primary major in undergrad, and I was too afraid to apply for fiction MFAs, so I applied to NYU on a whim and got in, which is the most entitled, annoying thing ever. And then I actually tried to defer because it was the only school I applied to, and I literally did the application like within the 48-hour period it was due. And they told me I would not be able to defer because it was too competitive. And I was like, I'm not stupid. I know I got in by accident. I have a very common name. Maybe it was a different Kimberly Parker out there whose spot I was supposed to take. So I went. And so, yeah, graduated from NYU.
Great story. Daniela?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. So I think for me, it's a little bit of a different path. I am from Mexico City, and I went to undergrad. I didn't study film, and I worked for 10 years at a film festival as a producer, as a programmer in different capacities. Also started working on documentaries. And I really just wanted to make time to explore filmmaking. And I was just immersed in so many different jobs and fronts. So I decided to get an MFA at the School of Visual Arts in New York. It was also a strange time because I also kept my job in Mexico City. So I would go back and forth, and just the experience of being a student, you know, using the camera and making films, and also being the producer of a large festival was a very particular experience, but also interesting, just coming from 10 years of experience to get an MFA and what that gives you.
Zita?
Hello, my name is Rosita. I went to UNC Chapel Hill, University of North Carolina. I went to their journalism school, majored in television broadcast. I had a time as a TV news reporter, and then I graduated from Northwestern's MFA doc media program. And my decision was fueled by trying to figure out how to do a career switch. You know, journalism was similar, but it wasn't really the same. And somewhere in between like my application period to when school started and I had gotten in and accepted, I had kind of figured it out. And I got to the point where I was like, do I still need to go to grad school? And I was like, well, you know, you're here now. So I kind of just went for it. And I'm sure I will explain more later about how I felt about that. But
I'm not going to answer all the questions, but so everyone knows, I went to the University of North Carolina School of the Arts. I really have no idea how I got there when I look back. I'm a very decisive person now and plan out my future, but I just really didn't then. And I wanted to be a photographer. I did that for a while, and I went to college at Northern Michigan and started taking some film classes and wanted to be a cinematographer, went to film school and ended up becoming a producer. So that was my trajectory. You know, I'm curious, you know, when I went to school, so I graduated in 2001, there were only a handful of film schools really that you chose from. My college was very new, actually. It was only in the school itself had existed as an art school, but the film school was only in its third year. But now, 20 years later, just about every university in every neck of the woods has some sort of film program. I think it's kind of a shiny, flashy program to get students to college, perhaps. Personally, I find this a bit problematic, but I'm really curious to know, what you guys feel about the high volume of film schools, if that's a good thing for the industry, or if that, potentially could be misleading given the lack of sustainability for filmmakers. Kim, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, it's strange because my undergrad, Johns Hopkins, which obviously is primarily known for STEM, engineering or bust, basically, they actually brought in John Tintori, who at the time was the chair of the film MFA, to revamp their film program. And I was happy for the Hopkins students who were there for sure, but part of me was like, does every school need everything? I don't know, like, because Hopkins is so well resourced and great, but I sometimes I just wish that that maybe instead of spreading their resources into everything, that schools actually like focused on like providing more grants or scholarships for people to lessen the amount of student debt versus like dumping a whole bunch of money into like expanding programs that they're not traditionally known for. I mean, the Hopkins film program has had, like, Matt Porterfield teaches there now, which is great. And I love Matt, and we're friends, which is great. But I just wish sometimes, because there are such limited resources, that they went more into like preventing further student loans, honestly, than like expanding other programs.
Yeah. Tori, I see you shaking your head. Do you have thoughts?
Yeah, I think it feels like, I remember a very successful filmmaker, I won't say who it is, like Oscar-winning filmmaker, coming back to Nebraska and talking and saying that he thought it was a waste of money to go to film school, particularly in undergrad. And I just finished film school, and I thought, well, that's a kind of a privileged thing to say. But like, as I look back on it, it's like, I mean, and I have a lot of great things to say about what I learned, more from mentors of mine in school, but also my peers. But like, there's also part of me that wishes I had just studied the arts and like really focused on like humanities and arts. And I mean, most of you did grad programs, I did undergrad, because I do feel like a lot of what I learned practically was in the field, just working. And luckily I don't have a lot of student debt, so I don't have the regret of like loans on my back. But it is something that I always question with schools now, and particularly with schools that don't have the staff or don't really have the money they're putting toward the program to practically give students a leg up for the industry. And that's what's most frustrating to me, is like, how can you say that this is a proper program if you're not really going to prepare students for the industry?
Or access to the right professors, working professionals, and yeah. Daniela, did you have thoughts?
I mean, I think it's complicated, precisely for student loans. I guess in my case, I had like a permanent job, so I was really compensating for all the expenses that I was having, and that's, I guess, a different position to be in. And I think it's a strange balance. On one hand, obviously, if you get lucky enough to get an incredible door into the film world, into a film, into someone who you admire, who you can work with, and you kind of get to understand how the industry works. That's a very unusual door to have in front of you. If you don't have that door, if you don't have that lock, definitely film school is a place where you can try out things, and trying out things in different positions, being able to hold a camera, being able to produce, being able to do a full post-production, or be a DP, or be different things. It also gives you a different empathy for the teams you're leading creatively, which is also, I think, such an important thing as a producer to have, just to be able to create dialogues with all the creatives on a team. So I think it also depends on what the experience is. I wouldn't say, I mean, of course, the student loans are just going to be like a heavy thing carrying on your back for such a long time that sometimes it's not even worth it. And I think film is not something that you learn in school. You come out of school and there is so many different things that are still a learning process in every single production, because all of them are different. Maybe in fiction less so, in nonfiction, documentary, hybrid, and kind of more experimental, there's always things that you come across. But I also think there is something in film school that allows you to try things in a safer space where you're not already working on a big production and maybe risking, all of it. So
well, like you were talking about, yeah, my college was set up so the first 2 years it was just round robin. You had 1 week you're shooting, then you're directing, then you're editing, and that's how I became a producer. As I started shooting and realized I didn't want to be a cinematographer, and so to be able to play with all that was really beneficial. Natalie or Rosita, is there anything you want to add to that before we move on to a different question?
Yeah, I think that is a very interesting question. I never really thought about it prior to this panel, but especially in everyone else's responses, I'm thinking more. So I don't necessarily think more film schools is a good thing, in that there's still no real effort from institutions to reach communities that actually will benefit from film school, or providing resources so those people can apply. And so what it just continues is an oversaturation of white straight men going to film school and then going into our very white straight male industry. So I don't think more film school is necessarily good or the answer. I think resources to reach intentionally marginalized communities is going to be the only way that could also be good.
Yeah. Natalie?
Agree with everything that's been said. And I think it really just comes down to and Danielle was kind of touching on this, what you want out of it. So, if there's a film school in your small town and you have no other way but to break in through that, then go for it. But there's definitely a problem with, saturation, I think, of film students coming in, and there's only so many jobs. So I would say just if you're deliberating film school, think, my 2 cents would be, think about if you're going in to try to get connections and meet people and break in, try to get into one of the bigger cities. It doesn't mean you have to go to USC or NYU, but at least be in the area where you're going to meet people that are going to actually break in and actually work, so that you don't feel like your investment, because it is quite a big one, goes to waste.
Danielle, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I was just going to throw out a question, and maybe this is something that I don't necessarily get out of, but in the context in the US is different. But I'm also, I always question, why are MFAs done immediately after undergrad? And why isn't it something that you can decide maybe 4 or 5 years afterwards? You can, maybe you went to a different undergrad, maybe you decide you want to try film school, and you start kind of experiencing. I feel like an MFA could also be at a moment where you're financially less unstable, that you have a little more experience, and that I remember at that SVA that I wanted to shoot a lot of things because that's what I was going to use my time. So I basically used the equipment all the time, constantly flew with it to Mexico back and forth to shoot these films that I wanted to shoot. And I was like, I'm going to use all the resources as much as I can. Obviously, all the teachers and professors, but also the screens and the equipment and everything that was at hand. So maybe it's also some part of the context, but also thinking that maybe MFAs could not necessarily be immediately after undergrad is also an option.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't go to grad. I don't know, Kim, if you want to answer that. I know a lot of people go to just extend the ability to keep working on projects, which is kind of bad. It's kind of crazy because you're paying to go work on projects. But at least the stories I hear and the producers I interview, it's very much about that.
No one should go straight from undergrad, honestly. I will say that in my class, there were 3 of us who were my age. And then I would say the average age was probably in the late 20s. One of my classmates was in her 40s. She had been working as an architect before going to film school, which is badass. But no, I would not recommend it. I was not mature enough. I definitely did not take the film MFA seriously. Ask any of my classmates. I definitely had a fun time, and my class is doing quite well. A bunch of people were nominated for Oscars this year, and Chloe won, and so did Molly. But no, I was playing around. I was like a child. I was not ready. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
wish-
also,
yeah.
oh, sorry,
No,
Rebecca.
go ahead.
I was just gonna say I agree with that. I think even like I had 4 years in between my undergrad and my MFA, and it wasn't that long, but it was so like it was very important. And you could absolutely tell like I just felt even more prepared from my work experience. And I know that people coming straight from undergrad didn't have the same experiences, and then therefore like didn't really get the same, I want to say, value out of the MFA. So yeah, I just agree with Kim.
Yeah.
I
I
actually,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I contemplated going back and getting my MFA like a year later. I was in that like gap year. I was already working. I wanted to go back to USC and do the producers program. And then I remember filling out the application and just having this like existential moment of like, aren't I kind of, I was an assistant at the time, but I was like, I'm kind of learning everything as I was answering the questions specifically about the producers program. And so I sat on it for another year. I thought about it, and then I ended up going to business school. And it was the best decision ever to not choose film. And the business program just informed so much of the filmmaking, and vice versa. So definitely agree with what's been said. Try to think a beat before jumping in.
I was going to say before you jumped in that I wish I would have done I wish I could have done a 4-year program where 2 years were film and 2 years was business. Like that, I think would have been the perfect setup for me, at least as a producer, which, leads me into what I want to get into next, which is kind of, a very big question, but, once you graduated and were out in the real world, or even now might be struggling with, what skills did you wish you had that you didn't know you needed? Kim?
I wish we actually, a couple of my classmates and I recently discussed how we wish there was like an exit class for our film MFA where they went through basics like when and how to start an S Corp, at which income level are you supposed to do that? How even to bring in people who had graduated recently who actually were able to pay their bills and stay in New York City, like how specifically they did that, and just sort of like a way out, because the way that we were shown at the time, because I went to NYU from 2007 to 2010, we were basically shown the Cary Fukunaga way, which is mixed and nombre, cut to the new James Bond movie. Like that's the path, which was not the most helpful thing. I did learn how to essentially like line produce in school, which was useful, but I do wish there was some more like actual real world practical stuff. I should email NYU after this.
We just send them the webinar. Yeah. Rosita?
Oh, I feel like I could probably take up the rest of the time to answer that question. So many, I have a very long list. I think echoing like what was just said, but also there was no instruction on how to sell your film, how to you're talking S Corp. How do you even set up an LLC? Like, how do you even like there is no step zero that was taught to us as far as like how to go out into the world and sell your film and get a distribution deal. I'm looking at contracts and like distribution deals and different like licensing situations as I'm like about to complete one of my films, and it's like all a different language. And I'm just like, I just did an MFA. There's no reason why I should be teaching myself this info right now. Never once pulled up a contract in class. So yeah, that's probably the first one.
Like, I don't know, to jump in, I am thinking about it. Like, I almost feel like I did the Sundance Producing Lab like 8 years ago. And that felt like that prepared me more for like, which I'd already had some of the experience they taught, but like the practicality of like producing both the creative and the logistics part than like what I learned in film school. And I did learn, I wrote a bunch of things that I want to talk about that I learned, but like the practical nature of like putting together a film. I remember like being handed like all the contracts like from a lawyer, and I was like, this is great, like to have these resources. And it was sort of shocking to me that I wasn't taught some of the basics of like, it's like setting up a new company each time you create a new project, and you're selling that company, you're assigning those rights to someone else, like just not understanding those basics, let alone like properly understanding how to finish a film. Like, I don't think I properly learned that. Like, we talked about it hypothetically, but like never really fully knew and understand how that worked.
I mean,
Yeah,
you
just
more, oh, go for it.
go now.
I was gonna say everything that like assistants know, like a CAA assistant knows, I wish they could take all that and make it a class, like literally down to how do you roll a call? Like how are deals? How do like fancy people have deals? Like what is an overall deal? What is a first look deal? Like all that language, it's actually like looking back, it's very shocking that you leave, at least I did at USC, you leave undergrad not hearing those words really. And I know that some professors teach it now. Like I know Jason Berman is at USC and apparently his class is amazing and is teaching all that. But the fact that that's not like core curriculum, just the basics of how the industry works, you know, that is like, that's astonishing, like base level, not even how to make a movie, just how does the industry function?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, echoing Tori, I also went to the Sundance Producers Lab years ago, and I remember just being able to ask like a lot of questions that nobody is willing to ask, like how, as a producer, like there's all these producers in a movie, like what do each producer do, or are these just kind of credits that you negotiate for something else, and things that mentors there were so very open about how the industry works. And it's hard in film school because it has to be something that it has like a specific structure, but these are things that are constantly changing. And the other thing that I was going to say is I also think that in terms of film school, I think it would be very important to know, of course, there's all these financing, grants, institutes, available money. And then there's other places that you just have to think outside of the box and figure out ways to access different fundings in a different way, because it's so competitive. Everyone is applying to the same grants, to the same bags of money, to the same financing. And maybe, coming from nonfiction, coming from documentaries, even, smaller, and in my experience, it's just a matter of really thinking like, how do you collaborate with nonprofits? How do you collaborate with other organizations that have funds that are not specifically for film, but that could be for film if there's a project that could, speak to a larger audience?
Yeah, I'm kind of in the space with Natalie. My first job out of college, well, I had like little jobs, but my first real job was working as the assistant to the head of acquisitions at Lionsgate. I didn't even know those were jobs. Like all I learned was like, go make your movie, make your short. I didn't have access. I didn't come from money. I didn't know how to raise money. I didn't know people with money, didn't know how to write a grant, like all the things. I didn't even have a script. It didn't matter. I didn't have a script I wanted to make. And so I knew I had to get a job, and I didn't even know what acquisitions was, first of all. And that like the agencies, like how to roll a call, like my boss hired me when I had done none of these things, and was very lucky that he did. He told me I was the least qualified person he interviewed for the job. But it's tangible work skills in the entertainment industry, I think, are a lot different than other industries. And so how do you do that so you can at least go get employment before you start figuring out what movie you want to make? I would have loved that class. I probably would have hated it when I was in it, but then getting out of school. So like if you're in that spot, like try to find somebody who's worked at some company that knows just that kind of basic assistant receptionist type work, so you can actually be employed and not stress right away about how do you make a movie. Because in addition to production jobs, there's all of those jobs as well. Yeah. So I'll switch different gears. I interviewed Jerry Kim a couple months ago. Jerry won the Producers Award at the Spirit Awards this year. And he went to Columbia, and in his interview, he talks about how people look to him to produce because he had a car. And I was like, that's so indicative of like what film school teach about producing. And he kind of, he defended it. He said, well, producing is really logistics and that it is helpful to have a car, which I understand. But I would love for you guys to talk about, the creative process. What did you or didn't learn in film school, that you now know about the creative process of producing that maybe was or wasn't taught in school? Natalie, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, sure. I will say the one thing, not the one thing, I learned a lot of things at USC, but the big thing at USC is like collaboration. I think they don't really like subscribe. I don't know who decided there, but they don't really subscribe to like the auteur theory. And I do think, that is a good thing in film school because you're really taught to like lean on your crew members, lean on your co-writer, your director. And so for me, like coming out of film school, that was something that I kept and I use every day at work. Like a lot of my core collaborators are from USC. So that was good. The thing that I think is not taught in film school, and honestly, I don't know how you teach this, I'd have to think on it longer, but is this idea of like, when you're in the real world and you're making a film, there's so many people that you're answering to, whether it's the person that gave you the money or, other producers or a studio. And that process of like, how do I fight for what I want? But at the end of the day, I'm delivering something and it is like a business at the end of the day. That is not really taught. I think it's more of like, make your vision and make it the way you want to, which is just truthfully like not how it works in the real world, unless you're doing a tiny indie film and you've raised the money from friends and family who don't care about what the finished product is. So I don't know if I'm even answering the question, Rebecca. I may have gone off, but yeah, that. And I don't know how to teach that, but I wish there was a way to kind of work that into the curriculum.
Yeah. Tori?
Yeah, kind of to piggyback off how you spoke about it, Natalie. I mean, film school was so long ago for me. I even called like my mentor to like remember. I was like, through, because she was my best teacher. But I mean, like we were taught collaboration and how everybody's a team and to work together to create the best film and product. But I agree in that. Well, also, I don't think the role of the producer was really spelled out to me. Like, I think I still always assumed it was the money person. And to me, that just sounded awful. Like, I just didn't want to be that person because it just sounded like somebody that everybody hated. It was a much more nuanced position. I didn't know it could be so much more than just the person in charge of the money. I sort of saw a producer as a line producer in college. And I wish I won't talk for too much longer, but I do wish they had taught or discussed the politics of what the job involves, because it is so much. You raise the amount of money that gives you a box to play in, and that is your world. And I wish like everybody from director to writers, whatever position you learn, that you learn it as a business and that there is a structure to that. And because I think so much in so many of these schools that's lost, and then a lot of these people in positions see producers as the bad guy again, and it's like no, I'm this because I love being a collaborator. I want to tell stories. So we didn't, I guess, to answer the question, we didn't really talk. We talked about the creative in terms of being collaborative, but I didn't really learn as much from a producer perspective how to manage that creative in order to create a product to sell.
Kim, you want to jump in?
Yeah, so I went to the NYU MFA when the year before they started the MBA MFA producer program. So I was like a year above like Jacob Robinson and like Shruti Ganguly. They were the first class. So I actually, I basically went through the auteur, like NYU's whole auteur thing. So it was like, how to block scenes. We'd get like a script from The Wire, and then we'd create shot lists and then watch the episode and talk with the director about how they chose it, and writing and things like that. And I think that That is actually really helpful to me to this day, even though directing actors seems like pure hell. And I'm still shocked that people want to do that for a job. It's like amazing. But I do think just having that kind of like grounding in the creative language is helpful in collaboration. And NYU is also like full of drama and fun and gossip and lots of like hot tea everywhere. And so I feel like it was also a weird training ground in like how to deal with like not just networking, but also like when networks go weird and how to preserve relationships, which is strange. But we did not talk about producing at all. And I do wish I had known that I wanted to be a producer then, and had just waited and done the program the next year. But
yeah. Rosita?
Yeah, one thing that I did learn or I was introduced to in film school were like experimental, artsy, like really weird type of like cinema. I had never really just come across that because I wasn't like a film nerd from birth. Like I am still not like I don't claim to be a film nerd. And so these like very niche type of films were very exciting for me to be introduced to. So my program did that well. I find it so interesting. So my MFA is documentary film, and hearing y'all's experiences they're a little different because in my program, I was so taken aback by I learned how to be like a team player because I was also like it was a few of us who were still working. I was basically working full-time through my full-time MFA program. It's crazy. And so I was like zooming in from like movie sets. So I learned how to be a team player by getting that hands-on experience. But our program really taught people how to shoot your own film, how to produce your own film. You're directing it. You also need to go edit your thesis film yourself. And all of my classmates were like self-destructing. And I was the only person who, well, I think maybe 2 or 3, but like I was one of the few people who built the team to do my thesis film. And I would like look around like, why are you editing your movie yourself? And I realized this because one, they didn't teach them that, but on top of that, I think I was the only person who went and got more money to make my picture. Northwestern gave folks $5,000 to make a short film, and you cannot make a film with $5K. And so what happened was everyone ended up being their own editor and being their own producer because they weren't taught to go out to find money, and they also weren't taught that you were supposed to do that then to build a team. So we were very much so, it felt like creating in a silo, which sounds like almost opposite of y'all's collaborative MFA programs.
Interesting. Yeah. Daniela?
I think the program that I went to, which is also a documentary program from School of Visual Arts, was also very practical. It was also about kind of shooting and editing and doing your own things in these kind of very small teams, and sometimes it was only alone. I had that experience of working on other films and film festivals and seeing all these films, but I felt like my years at the MFA at the School of Visual Arts felt very looking inside to kind of train, but not really connecting with what was happening kind of in the producer's world or what it needed to be. I think for me, it served its purpose because I just needed to go more into this bubble and try things out. But I can only imagine, and of course, a lot of things were super boring because I already had made a movie, and that's just because I was coming from a different experience. But I can only imagine just being immersed in these bubble and then going out and then figuring I have all these tools and I have all these energy about my vision and doing my film and going out there and directing and then hitting just a completely different reality on how you can make that happen.
Yeah. I'm curious, this is kind of another big question, but when I graduated film school, I feel like there was such a clear path of what, for both film and TV and doc, and we're in a place right now with both consolidation and expansion. So we saw, the news about CA and ICM merging, but at the same time, we have every streaming platform under the sun, some that we've never even heard of, where people are making content for. And so I'm curious from everybody, what, somebody who's in film school or kind of emerging and just getting started, how would you describe the industry that they're walking into now and the state of the business? Kim?
It's weird. It's also like the IATSE strike is like so in my mind.
Well, yeah.
It's like it's tough because it's hard not to see it as like a weird, like small mirror to the rest of society, because I feel like the haves have a lot and the have-nots have even less right now. A lot of lip service about diversity and about parody and about not sexually harassing us like we're living through Mad Men in 2020. So, but I don't know how much of that is really real. It's the thing that is cool about now, I don't want to be a total Debbie Downer, is that the actual filmmaking tools are more accessible than ever. Like when I started freelancing, the red one did not exist. Like people had to literally purchase film. So like you were stuck to 11-minute rolls of 16, and that cost a precise amount, and you could not make your freaking movie without these like extreme assistance and stuff. And so for the actual like directors out there who also write, I think now is a very exciting time. But in terms of people who want to produce, I think it can be tough, but I don't know, just support good stories, support good voices, and don't try to do like fake Hollywood movies that are like Hollywood movies light. Try to support like stories with teeth or people with real perspectives. Those are the films that break out in the independent space.
Tori?
Well, one thing I wanted to go back to your last question just real quick. I forgot, because I wrote this down about creative that we were talking. I think two things I really took away from film school that I remember is like, in creative, what we were taught is like, I had a theater base at my school, which actually was really amazing. So like we were in directing classes where we learned how to direct actors. We had to take technical theater where we had to learn how to build sets, and like they were for theater, but like totally practical. Like my first job was on a TV show on a stage. So like I knew all the equipment, I knew all these things. And I'm really grateful for that base. And then like my school was not competitive. Like we were all there to help people. And most everybody in my year, not most, but I would say less than half are not in the industry anymore, but like we all loved movies. And so like, I think like just the experience of like, I learned so much about film from my peers because I came in with a very limited film knowledge. And there were some film studies classes I took, which really opened up my mind to like, I didn't know anything about indie film. I didn't know anything about foreign film when I went to school. So like, it really like taught me so much about others and other perspectives and all of that. And I'm really grateful for that. In terms of getting into the industry, yeah, I agree with Kim. I mean, it's so funny to think back, like there was one HD camera at my university when I went to school. It was a Cine Alta, and it was like a part of the news program. And it was like, you did not have the ability to shoot that. So everybody had like DXLs. Like you were cool if you had a DXL, which I'm sure most of the people on this are like, what is that? Like offline? What is DV tapes? All this stuff. But yeah, everything is so accessible now. And I think the best advice I was ever given when I got out of school was actually from a peer of mine who's a director, was just produce. Like not only, of course, you have to figure out how to survive and figure out a way to break in, but like if you want to produce or you want to direct, like just do that. Like, and then there's also the side conversation about how do you survive and what's the way up, depending on where you want to work in the industry. And so like the other thing the industry is constantly changing, and it looks nothing like it did really when I started, but is to just like do your homework. I spent a lot of time in college trying to find an internship that would benefit me. And so like, I would just say, and I didn't have connections. So it was like just scouring. Now everything's online. There's Facebook, there's all this stuff. So like look up credits on IMDb, figure out the films you like, figure out access to companies phone numbers are on IMDb. Like, just like really do your homework and figure out who you should meet and talk to in order to get into the industry and find your way in. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah. Natalie?
Yeah, it's funny. I think there's always this talk of like, it's harder and harder to break in, but I don't think it's ever been in the last 30 years, like necessarily easy to break in. I think the industry, the truth is a lot of people want to be in this industry because it is fun and everyone likes movies. But I think the thing that has changed, and there was a whole like movement about it, I think a year or two ago, is just like pay. And Rebecca, you're all about this. Like it's not very sustainable now, especially as like a producer or someone entry level even. I know assistants that just like don't make enough money to, you know, pay their rent. So I think something that has to be talked about more is having like a side hustle and like normalizing that. Like the first 4 years that I was producing, I did not nearly make enough money to live just off of producing. So I was doing budgets on the side and, you know, budgets and schedules and charging people for that. And, you know, started to own the fact that I have a background in physical production, whereas that's sometimes like not, you know, sometimes that's looked down upon in the creative world or in the studio world. But I was like, fuck it, I'm gonna, sorry for cursing, I'm gonna own that and I'm gonna use that as a way to survive. And I'm not gonna quit just because I can't, you know, pay my bills. So I think it's just harder to sustain now more than ever. But that said, and especially as for directors and writers, there is such a demand, like to your point, Rebecca, with all these streamers, like there's so much demand. It's just trying to get, you know, how do you get there?
Yeah. Rosita?
Yeah, echoing everything. I think everyone's path, as we've said, will be different. I think what's true is that like you can, breaking in is hard, like you can do it. It's not impossible. And I think what's unique to the industry and the layout of the way things are now is that everything is so digital and virtual. Even film festivals are now like virtual, and that also means that everyone is, you know, doing this. We're all sitting at home on our laptops, like, and so people, filmmakers are like probably borderline narcissists, and we love talking about our projects, and they are, you know, sitting at their email waiting for your email to say, hey, can I just get a quick 30-minute, you know, Zoom call with you? I want to ask you about this film you're producing. And they're gonna be like, heck yeah, I'm gonna tell you about my film I produced it. And then you slide in there and you're just like, can I, you know, PA? That just happened to me. I was doing a shoot back home, and someone I went to undergrad with was trying to like switch careers. She has another career doing something else, and she just sent me a message like, hey, I see that you have a shoot in North Carolina. Can I PA? We love PAs. Yes, please come PA. I was looking for one, by the way. So I think that people will tell you that it's hard, but it's definitely possible. And people are home, so like just reach out to folks.
Danielle, you have thoughts on entering the state of the industry right now?
I just think that a lot of really great ideas have come up. Just echoing what has been said about reaching out, about making your homework, about looking at credits, looking at logos at the end of films, who's funding what, how is it being funded, what's the way around it. Coming from the nonfiction world, like what are the social impact campaigns that are attached to these films, that are attached to these issues? I think that's very important. And I do think it's hard to break even. I do think it's possible. I think the most important thing for me has been to be very honest about the type of films that I make and that I like to make. I usually make pretty risky films. So that's also the type of films that I like to make. I don't want to make taco series, and and it's okay. You know, it's fine if that's what you want to do, but that's not what I want to do. And kind of knowing the types of things that you want to do or the types of things that you have to do. And I also like what Natalie said about keeping something, you know, I worked for 15 years at a film festival, and that was something that it was a window to a lot of things. And I was also producing on the side, but I had kind of a more stable salary that would allow me to try things out, or to work for free for a film, or to try to learn from a filmmaker and go out shooting. So that gives you a lot of flexibility in kind of the path that as you're writing it. And also the state of film right now and how things are changing with cinemas and platforms. I think we're too immersed in kind of a moment where things might be going somewhere different. The one thing that we can stick to is trying to, even with everything that has been said, to try to not make the films that we think or platforms think that people want to see, but the films that we want to make. And that's so hard because coming from a film festival, I also think that there is a work to be done around audiences, about building audiences. And we don't think about building audiences. We think about there's the audience, and this is what the audience wants to see. But if we don't build new audiences for the types of contents that we're creating and that we're interested in exploring and the types of narratives, then those things are just going to be like circling back.
Yeah, I think a lot of people try to jump on like what's in the moment, but like I have a television show based on a book, and the part of the core of the book was about cancel culture, and it's a mother-daughter story at the core, but that is part of the plot. It's a show with Amazon. It's been in development for 4 years. Like, and now plenty of other shows have done cancel culture. So it's like we're having to so it's like you really have to make sure that you connect to what you're telling, regardless of what moment you're in. Yeah. I'm curious, we're talking a lot about what you didn't learn, but I'm really curious to hear from everybody, if you had a mentor in school, what did that person teach you? Did you learn something from somebody in school that you carry with you in the producing work you do every day? Natalie?
I actually learned so I went to a high school that had like a media focus program, and that was my first kind of exposure to like making things in a team and watching things and critiquing them. And my freshman year teacher, Tom Durkin, who's passed away sadly, is the person who taught me like how to give a note and the importance of like when you are watching something that someone's worked on, coming out with the positives, coming out the gate with the positives, and giving criticism that is constructive, and trying to get to the bottom of your note, like if something bumps you, and putting that into words. And that was so amazing, because when I got to film school and we started to critique each other's work, I was like, oh, I'm able to put into words things that are helping my peers, and I was frequently called out for good note giving. So that was cool. Not from, I guess, from a mini film school, from high school film school.
That's great. I learned about doing notes as an assistant in the studio space, which then has helped me as a producer. Had no idea how to do it in school. Yeah. Rosita?
Yeah, I think that mentors are so key and so important, and I would not be where I am without my mentors. In institutional spaces continues to be like uninviting, unwelcoming places to Black women. I had to travel outside of my institutional spaces to find my mentors, who are all Black women who wrote like, put the ladder down to raise other people up behind them. I think that with Northwestern's documentary program, it is, as you were saying about your program, like it's a very new program. So while it has its flaws, they understand that it's new. So they actually listen to your feedback. And something that I continuously, like stand on in every space that I'm in is just trying to make it more inviting for Black women. I had no Black women film professors. So yeah, mentors are important. Sometimes you have to find them outside of, film school though.
Kim?
I had a teacher in my all-girls Catholic school in Baltimore give great advice, which is basically just show up on time every day prepared. And like, he was this old religious white dude, but I carry that every day, because no matter what you're doing in your life, that is excellent advice. And then, I actually have to say, I wouldn't really be intense and call this person a mentor, but I will say Alex Orlovsky, who produced like Place Beyond the Pines and like Blue Valentine, when I was doing my first movie as a lead producer, like I had no idea what the hell I was doing. I was like, investing, what is that? How do we raise money? And like the director and I basically did it ourselves, and it's just like a hot mess. Alex answered every annoying question I had, and like was in production on like a bigger movie, and would take the time to answer my questions. And I always try to remind myself of that when people ask me for my time, because honestly, it's how I got through my first movie. Alex and the production legal. Yes.
Nice. Daniela?
Yeah, I was just thinking, I mean, in terms of notes, I agree. I think it's so important to learn how to give notes. I mean, for me, learning how to give notes was to a director and seeing how she was taking notes, especially the ones that give you fixes and specific fixes, and how she was reacting to kind of solutions, right? she was like, never listen what the solutions, always listen what's behind people are referring to. And I think that also starting with the positive mentally is such a good way to go in. And echoing Kimberly, I think there is something about how mentors, how generous sometimes you find mentors being with their time that just forces you to be the same way when people are asking for your time. And especially within communities. I mean, I remember Lourdes Portillo telling Natalia Almada, who I've worked with a lot, like, you know, I'm going to give you all these time, but there's going to be a time where you're going to have to pass it on and give your time also maybe to a, you know, female Latin filmmaker that needs to kind of understand what the you know, what the landscape looks like. I had a mentor and someone in film school, Sam Pollard, who was my advisor for my thesis. And I finished after my MFA a thesis that wasn't ready. I wanted to finish my film, and it took me maybe 2 or 3 more years to finish it. And he just kept being that person I could reach out and I could meet with, and who gave notes. And it was just incredible that someone loves film in a way that is interested in your process. So that's incredible. Just and I had a lot of people that I and a lot of professors and that I would see how committed they were to their own profession, not necessarily as teachers, but as professional, as editors, as DPs, as directors, and just seeing how they relate to their own work was very inspiring, and also kind of trying to mirror that. I think that's also very inspiring in film school, just seeing working professionals and how they relate to their work.
Tori?
I had one particular mentor who I'm still very close to in film school. She's a very acclaimed production designer. She came back and taught at Lincoln for a little while, Sandy Veneziano, who I like called before this. I was like, remind me, what do we learn? But yeah, she would just tell these great stories from different sets, like of films I grew up watching, but talk about collaboration and being a team and respecting everybody. And I don't remember one particular piece of advice, but I do remember the collective of what she taught through the experiences she always shared. And she brought in directors that would talk about directing actors and how to get what you wanted out of them, and just giving all these tidbits and real advice. But I do remember, I think somehow through osmosis, I learned how to sort of politely pester and follow up with people that I admired and wanted to get to know and learn from. And I think that's how, like, I was trying to think back to how I got in the business and how I kind of like hustled from one job to another. And I think someone said it earlier, but it's like people are quite generous with their time and sharing what they know and how they got into the industry, because everyone knows it's not easy. Well, some people know it's not easy to get into this business who maybe didn't have a connection. And so I think, you know, the thing I learned was like to not only like not be afraid to ask questions and ask for advice from people, especially if you don't know. I think it's like, it makes you look even that much wiser to say like, I don't know, I'm going to like research and find it out. And the surprising thing is a lot of people in this business do want to share advice with others. So I don't know, I guess I'm trying to share some advice that could help other people. Like, don't be afraid to ask questions of people or ask for people's time in a kind way, and not abuse that. But that's the way you'll sort of break in. There's not, you know, a website to go for jobs. It's just, you have to be willing to ask those questions to get in.
Yeah, I couldn't think of something exactly from college, but I also managed the Sundance Producing Lab for years, which is how I met Tori. And Lynette Howell was an advisor one of the years, and she said, you know, get to know somebody before you ask them for something. And that's something that I still think about all the time, of don't just blindly send out scripts and ask for things. Like, get to know a person first, and it becomes much more about a human connection with somebody than just a lot of emails of your inbox of people needing something for you. So to wrap us up, I think one of the reasons I started Dear Producer is because there aren't really resources out there for producers. It's growing, and there was a time where there was essentially nothing. But I would love to know from everybody, and also maybe like, since we talked about mentors, how do you, if you have tips on finding a mentor, but what do you think are really strong resources for newer producers getting to the business, or just resources you kind of constantly come back to that you find helpful, or just tips on reaching out to a mentor? I think some of you talked about it, but any resources you want to throw out there other than this site? Rosita?
Yeah, resources. I am based in the Midwest. So for me, Chicago Filmmakers is a really great organization. They also have online courses that are like 3-week classes, 2-week classes where you don't have to go to film school and you can still take these courses. I would shout them out. They gave me my very first film grant. I had no clue what I was doing. And as far as like documentary goes, can I put something in the chat?
Yeah.
Oh, yes, I can. There's like a searchable grant database. I think that's off of IDA's website, I want to say. But that's just a resource if you're someone and you have like an idea and you're trying to figure out like, how do I find money to make a film? A way to do that is grant applications and things like that. So
Great. Kim?
It is a little cliche, but I would highly recommend the podcast Script Notes, which everyone on this has probably listened to, but they actually have episodes about how to give notes, and like teaching producers and executives how to give better notes. And it's from like Craig Mazin wrote like Chernobyl, screenwriters, and they also cover industry stuff. So I would recommend, that's a good flossing skincare podcast.
It's a great one. I love Script Notes.
Tori?
I'm also going to say something that I feel like everybody may assume, but like there's so many labs. I mean, and then I think there's a lot of other talks by other organizations I would recommend. Of course, Sundance being probably what I think has the best producing lab from what I know. I've participated in others that have been really worthwhile, and I've met people that have expanded my network. There's obviously like IFC has a number of events they do, and they have a great community. So those are two big ones, obviously, in the US. And then I would try to find whatever your local community, like I know in Nebraska, at least I live in LA now, there's a Nebraska Coast Connection, which I'm getting to know, which brings in people that are sort of successful in the industry from Nebraska to talk to other Nebraskans. So, depending on where you're from, there may be some kind of mixer. Obviously, we're in COVID still, but that might be beneficial to meeting people and getting in.
Great. Natalie?
I was going to say Script Notes, but also, film festivals, not as someone with a film, but just like go as a film goer. I have actually like bumped into people at Sundance that have become, I think because you're at a film festival and there's this like shared experience happening, I find the networking at film festivals to be like 10 times better than like a random mixer in LA. So just go to a festival. I know so many people that are like, I'm holding out until I have a film. Go before, because also it took me like 2 years to understand how to like take care of myself at Sundance and not starve and freeze to death. So go to film festivals and just watch movies and talk to people in line. You meet really cool people.
Great. Daniela?
I was thinking, I think for the nonfiction world, obviously the IDA has a lot of resources, as it was said before. I would also recommend going to the Doc Society page. Doc Society it is a nonprofit, that kind of tries to connect documentary films with audiences globally, and they have so many different resources, and it's a great resource page.
And my advice is always just to read. When I was in school, we didn't have Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, and like you had to have a hard copy of Variety in order to read the news. And so now there's really no excuse to not know what's going on in the business, which, you may be in a position where you don't need it quite yet, but it'll help you shape what you're figuring out, what you're trying to do. And then when you do meet people at festivals, you know the business, you know what's going on, you're up to speed, and to just read as much of creative work as business work as possible. So that's my advice. Well, we have gone over our mark, and so I want to thank these wonderful women for such a candid and honest conversation, and thank the DPA, Beth Levinson you met, and also Megan Gilbride. They both helped me wrangle everybody here today. I will post the replay in a couple days, so just follow Dear Producer on social media or sign up for the newsletter and I'll shoot it out. And yeah, thank you guys. Again, the audience would be clapping if they could. So thank you for being here for us.
Thank you, Rebecca. Nice to meet you, ladies.